First of all, welcome everyone to the Montgomery County Civic Federation December meeting. I'm Joyce Gwads, and I'm the first vice president. I'm leading this meeting tonight only because our president, Cheryl Gannon, has decided to travel this week, and she's off on a wonderful trip. So I'm happy to do my best for her. The first order of business is to approve the agenda, which was published on page 2 of the newsletter if you're looking at it online. Is there a motion here to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Please say
Aye.
Aye.
opposed, say no. The agenda is adopted. And the next order of business is to adopt the minutes of the November 14th meeting, which were published on page 13 of the newsletter. Do we have a motion to adopt the minutes?
Motion to adopt the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The minutes are adopted. And next we have the treasurer's report, which is Jerry. Jerry Garson will give us the report. And
we operate on fiscal year from July 1 through June 30th, 2025. We've so far collected $1,506 in dues. I got an email that another $35 is on the way. Probably won't get to us till tomorrow or the next day. And we have expenses of $1,028, giving us a net income for the period of $478. Our current bank balance is $6,694. And if anyone has any questions, send me an email or contact me later on. There's been basically no change since recently. Thank you.
Okay, and next on our agenda is our speaker.
Announcements.
Oh, well, I thought announcements were after the speaker, so we didn't have to listen to them. But
I just want to remind everyone that this is Jerry Garson. I just want to remind everyone next Monday night we have a meeting at 7 o'clock, a Zoom meeting on assessments. This will affect 1/3 of the county. Anyone who was assessed previously as of January 1st, 2022 will be affected by it. And the notice is in our, and the link is in our newsletter. And hopefully anyone who has any questions can send me an email in advance. Thank you.
Okay, well, if we're doing announcements, I'll do one also, which is that for our January meeting, Mark Elrick will be talking to us about the budget. Okay, now we'll move on to our speaker program, which is Dr. Taylor, who joined us as our Montgomery County Schools superintendent on July 1st. So he's new. He grew up, what I like is he grew up in Montgomery County and is a product of our Montgomery County Public Schools. And before coming to us, he's actually, this is in the newsletter, has more than 25 years of experience as an educator with more than 12 years in district level leadership and 6 years as a superintendent. And immediately before coming to us, he served as superintendent in Stafford County Public Schools in Virginia, where he was named Virginia Region 3 Superintendent of the Year in 2024, honoring the student-focused work that he led. We hope that Dr. Taylor will be able to tell us something about what he sees for the future of MCPS, both near-term and longer-term goals, and what he sees as the challenges faced by MCPS, which I think we're all pretty familiar with since there's been a lot of publicity to those. Dr. Taylor, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. And as I was doing a little bit of prep for our conversation today and looking at the mission of this august group, I see that we're very aligned in focusing on the quality of life for Montgomery County and how we can enhance the quality of life for Montgomery County. The things that happen in the school system space have an impact on the county as a whole. And those inputs have a direct output into our county. So they are connected, and I'm just delighted that we have an occasion and some time to talk today. And I certainly hope that you'll have me back I hope that this is the first of many conversations that we can have about your county school system and what we expect for the future and where we see the county school system going. And I'm glad that you're having a conversation with our county executive in the next month's meeting, because there is a relationship between how the county spends its resources and how it aligns its resources to supporting the services that are really important to us. And those services include things like public safety, making sure that our roads are kept up and that our schools are functioning, but more importantly, producing great adults. And that's really what my focus is. I'm in the great adults business. We want to have a hand in preparing young people so that they can be successful adults and give back to their community in a really meaningful way and live fulfilling lives. I am so proud, and I would say that this is probably my best credential, is that I graduated from Montgomery County Public Schools. I was a Montgomery County lifer from kindergarten all the way through the 12th grade. And my roots are deep in this community. It's a roundabout story of how I ended up coming back to Montgomery County. But when the opportunity presented itself, it was an easy decision for my family, because we already spent every holiday and most family get-togethers back in the county. And what educator doesn't want to have a role in making their home school system great, especially since there were so many great teachers that had a positive influence on my education. It's been a whirlwind 6 months, and I've just been the superintendent for 5 of those last 6 months, and making the changes necessary to come to Montgomery County and hit the ground running. I hope that the community has already started to see some changes, and that some of those changes have been felt in some of our culture and climate, some of our response to how we are addressing some of the challenges that happen. We're a big enough entity where bad things are going to happen on a routine basis, but how you respond to those things becomes really, really important. And doing that with integrity and with consistency and with a focus on the things that are most important is what matters to me. I'm actually going to drop something into the chat, and it is a link to a report. You don't have to check on it now. I want to tell you what it is, but please feel free to click on it later. It's a report on my first 6 months back in Montgomery County and serving as a superintendent. I promised the board that I wouldn't tinker with too many things right out of the gate, that I would observe, that I would listen, that I would relearn Montgomery County, and that I would talk to many people before making recommendations for changes. And I will tell you that I'm at the place where it is definitely time to move from thoughts and discussions to action and make some corrections to some of the things that are clearly troubling us. I want to highlight a few of the observations that I've seen so far, some that are positive and some that are negative and really do need to be addressed. I will say that this community absolutely loves its school system and always have. It is actually one of the things that I cherished as a student and now as a pretty critical stakeholder and someone who has family in the school system, is that we have really high expectations for our school system, but that we back it up and that we want to make sure that there's adequate support for our educators who are doing the heavy lift in our schools. The reality is that our educators have struggled of late. And finding their footing coming back from the pandemic has been slow, and their progress has been even slower. And if anything, we've lost a lot of ground in a short period of time and have not been able to regain our footing. And some of that is definitely tied to what kind of support we provide in the classroom, particularly at the elementary level. Special education and how we provide for our students with disabilities is really strained. It is a consistent message that we are hearing from our community that there are significant modifications and changes that need to take place to make special education better. And that is probably our most significant area of improvement. Our fastest growing population of students is our students who are learning the English language. Providing adequate supports for them while maintaining their trajectory for academic excellence is a really significant challenge academically, but it is something that we need to focus on and be really intentional about. You may have heard or seen a lot of concern about school safety. And I just want to echo how this should be everyone's top concern, and it certainly is mine. We've put a number of things in place, some that are very low-cost solutions that have already had a really significant impact, and some things that we're earmarking for the future that are both low-cost, no-cost, and high-cost solutions that will definitely improve safety in our schools. But our schools are a very different place in the world than when we were going through school. And the challenges today in the school safety space are really, really disturbing and really challenging in terms of the things that our kids have access to and how those things are utilized and showcased with social media and how those things have compounded the landscape. It's a really significant issue. One of the things that sadly has not changed a whole lot in the 30 years since I was a student at MCPS was how students access unique and special programming in our schools. There is a real gap in terms of access from one end of the county to the other end of the county in terms of what opportunities are available to some of our young people. This has definitely had an impact on our performance and also limits what our kids can do in terms of their post-secondary preparation. It's a real uphill battle. MCPS of late has not been particularly good at communicating with the community, and in fact, there are a number of online jokes about how badly MCPS communicates with the community in terms of how they are opaque and obfuscate in a lot of their communications. This is an area that I've already had a positive impact on, I hope, in terms of disclosing more information, being a little bit more clear with our community. And I have a casual way about me, which is not very MCPS, is what I've been told. Some people find that refreshing. I'm sure others find it frustrating. I'm very much a first name basis kind of guy. So please feel free to call me Thomas when we talk and when we interact with one another, because I am pretty informal. And I think that as adults in our community who care about children, we should be on a first name basis and working side by side together. The last couple things that I'll mention in terms of some challenges that I've identified have to do with our facility condition. Our facilities are not in great condition. They have not been kept up. And what was once a school district that was renowned for its school construction processes and its implementation lacks severely and tends to make more mistakes than get things right. And those mistakes have financial consequences. And so straightening out some of that has been an interesting and unpleasant journey. But bringing some of the internal controls that are necessary to MCPS for financial stability is something that I'm very passionate about and something that I think will help us in the long run, because there are a number of fiscal vegetables that we need to eat in order to stay healthy. The last space that I'll touch on that I think is noteworthy and kind of pointing towards the future, and then I'll segue that into kind of where I see us going as an organization, has an awful lot to do in the policy space. I think that there was a well-intentioned belief that we should kind of ease off the gas a little bit during the pandemic and immediately after the pandemic, and focus on our kids and their well-being. I think that that's very important. Kids that are not in a positive space do not learn very well. Kids who are hungry don't learn very well. Kids who are unfocused don't learn very well. But I think we've given up in that process are some high expectations for performance. And so Bethesda Magazine published a pretty condemning article this fall about, has MCPS lost its edge, and do its most recent grading policies make the school system look soft? I scoured that article for anything that I thought would look untrue, and I couldn't find anything. I thought it was a pretty damning, but also a pretty clear and honest look at some areas that we could improve in terms of resetting expectations to make the school system a little bit better. Our kids have figured out how to game the system, and they've certainly figured out how to take advantage of lax attendance policies and lax grading policies to have grade inflation. And what really needs to take a front seat is student learning. And so what I hope, pointing into the future, is a few things. One, I am very hopeful and feel as though I have the support necessary to reset expectations on a much higher level, whether they be academic expectations or behavioral expectations. But setting some higher expectations and holding to those expectations are going to be pretty critical for our success in terms of raising the bar for what we want our students to do, because we know that they can do it. When we set high expectations and provide the supports for our kids to get to those high expectations, they excel. And that's quite clearly what needs to happen, and I think that we can do that. The second thing is being really intentional about the type of support that we provide. What is most important in our school system? What must we do in order to make the classroom experience great? There's really two levers that public schools pull. The first one is we have great educators who create these really memorable learning experiences that inspire our young people to become great adults. And they do that in really positive learning environments that are safe, welcoming, and inclusive. And the reality is that we've got these great educators already. We've got a great workforce that really is intent on providing great experiences for our kids. And on the whole, that is going really well. I would do some things differently with alignment and setting some expectations in that space. But on the whole, that part's going really well. But on the learning environment space, we have a lot of work to do, and a lot needs to be improved in just some really basic areas like providing HVAC systems that work, providing school facilities that are functional, and when something breaks, we actually fix it. But also making sure that our school communities are safe and welcoming places for the kids that walk through the front door. So that they can feel like they're in a position to learn, and not all of them are. Recently, we've had a lot of concerning events that have happened in some schools that are really troubling, and we hope that it's not a sign of a shift in mindset. But these are things that don't align with our values as a community, and don't align with our hope of more inclusive communities. And so those things need to be corrected from a cultural standpoint. I am optimistic about our future. The goals that the Board of Education has laid out in terms of school safety, in terms of focusing on mathematics and literacy, in terms of recruitment and retention, are the right goals to have. And they are pointing us in the right direction in terms of how we can be more intentional about what happens in the classroom space and more focused on what our classroom environment looks like to improve performance and really to have kids engaged in school again in a more meaningful way. I've seen some positive movement this school year already in terms of a decrease in incidents of student misbehavior. I've seen an increase in attendance this school year already. The jury's still out on some academic measures, but the things that I've seen so far have been pretty encouraging in terms of student growth. So I think that there are some indicators that we are putting the train back on the tracks and that MCPS is moving in the right direction, but there's still a tremendous amount of work to do. I do have some concerns about some of the sustainability of some of the financial initiatives. One of the things that wasn't mentioned, but I can tell you in my history and in my bio is that I'm a little bit different in the school administration space because I come from the business and finance world of school administration, and I hope to put my MBA to use in terms of tighter fiscal controls and making investments that generate a return on investment versus ones that are candidly just throwing money away. And I think that there's plenty of both, but finding those gems that really do give us a great return on the community dollar is very, very important to me. So with that, I think it's important that I pause. I've done enough talking for the last 20 minutes. And I probably am going to kick this back over to Joyce if you're going to quarterback how we do the questioning and whatnot. But I will say that I'm getting ready to do my first budget presentation next week on the 18th at 6 o'clock, and I invite everybody to participate. Candidly, I could really use your support. Some of the discussions that we need to have are going to be tough. But I'm committed to an iterative process and not asking for the moon without providing a game plan on how we can achieve some of our goals. And what a great question for you to prompt our county executive with next month. I'm happy to tee him up to take all the hard bullets. So with that, Joyce, I'll leave it to you to quarterback what happens next.
Actually, I'm going to bounce it over to Alan because he's the one who knows all the buttons to push.
Oh, Alan.
How to answer the raised hands and so on. So I will invite questions from everybody. Raise your hands, please, if you have a question for Dr. Taylor.
Paul, please.
Yes, so I know a couple of teachers that have actually quit MCPS because they were told they couldn't fail students. And these are students that wouldn't try, they wouldn't come after school, but their administrators told them they couldn't fail them. They didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And I think that does a great disservice to the students because you push them up to the next grade and the next grade, and they learn that they don't really need to learn the material to move ahead, but that leaves them without the foundational education to get a job that will make them self-sustaining for the rest of their lives. So are you going to be able to address that particular issue? That's part of the great inflation, but it's the people that don't come to school and don't do the work yet pass anyway.
Yeah, so actually, this is precisely what I was talking about. And I actually do think I have critical mass to make a policy change. And I'm actually feeling pretty great about that. That was a pretty garbage policy that I inherited. I'm not real thrilled about it. I think it has set expectations pretty low for what our kids can do. I know why they went with the policy approach that they went with, and I think that there was definitely good intentions behind making that grading policy change, but I think that those circumstances are long outlived, and a time to return to sanity and higher expectations is long overdue. And I'm very optimistic about being able to reinstitute a policy that has higher expectations.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next question, Jeremiah Pope.
Yes. Hi and good evening. My name is Jeremiah Pope. I'm the president of Hillendale Citizen Association, and I'm happy to be here this evening.
Nice.
How you doing, Dr. Taylor? We've spoken several times.
Yeah.
I have a young son and MCPS and school in the eastern part of the county. And I know, we talk about a lot of different disparities and those type of
Yeah.
issues. I think you brought up about, disabilities, trying to get the kids to be able to read and write by the third grade. But one thing that concerns me the most is this anti-blackness that's happening in our public school system.
Yep.
And I know it was a very, very disturbing article in MoCo 360 today
Yep.
in regards to Wooten High School principal. I attended a school board meeting where a number of students um, um, sat down and talked to the school board members about the anti-blackness in some of our high schools and also in our middle schools. And I wanted to know from your standpoint, and I'll give you an example as well, is what's the game plan to address this issue? I know when the first day that my son attended Burt Mills Elementary, and my son now is in the third grade. But my first experience at Burnt Mills Elementary was being on a call. And on that call, it was a PTA Zoom call where we had a number of people on the call. And my school is mostly Black and brown people. And my first experience on that call was somebody getting on the call and using the N word and calling people monkeys and all that. And so that was 3 years ago, and we're still having the problems today. And
Yep.
so, what's your game plan to try to do some diversity and inclusion discussion, something, because it's unacceptable and it's too much.
Yeah, what a great way to explain it as unacceptable. And just in case everybody's not up to speed on kind of just what's been going on, what Jeremiah explained is spot on. And I just want to be crystal clear about how bad this really is. What we're experiencing, and we can use Wooten as a good example. This is a community who doesn't feel like they've got it. They feel like they've got a great school because you know what? They do have a great school and there's some great academic outcomes that are coming out of Wooten, but there's some climate and culture issues, where not every kid feels valued and included and uplifted. And there are some outward, racial, threats that are made where kids do not feel safe in the school, and it is as bad as reported. The most important thing that I can say is that in responding to Wooten and in responding to situations like Wooten, there's really a few considerations. The first one is as soon as we're aware of it, and these are events that happened last Monday that I was not aware of until Thursday of last week, that we find a way and create structures to support kids that are in a victimized situation. And that if there are staff members that are similarly victimized, that we have some support structures for them as well. So caring for our kids is number one. Making sure that that we clearly communicate our expectations and that we provide that support is critical. Number two, that we hold people accountable and that we have mechanisms for holding people accountable. That this is not a super friendly piece of this conversation, but there was a leadership change at that school on Thursday night because I was made aware of something that happened on Thursday afternoon. And sometimes a leadership change is necessary, and sometimes that needs to be swift. I'm not afraid to do that. I recognize that that sometimes puts me sideways with a union or two, but the reality is that school safety needs to take a front seat, and making sure that we're dealing with issues when they happen and we're dealing with them in a consistent and fair way is really important to me. So when I see something that doesn't go the way that it's supposed to go, or it's not being handled the appropriate way, rest assured you're going to get a very swift and sharp reaction from me. And in this case, that's what happened. I was very disappointed to find out that the entire school that was supposed to receive some training in this space did not receive that training. And that's very disheartening. We definitely have held students accountable for what's happened according to our code of conduct. We've addressed staff behavior in a direct way, and we have now stopped the world and done emergency training with staff that they should have done prior to the start of the school year, but didn't do. There are some really significant gaps, and those things are like a recipe for this continued bad behavior. And all the great ideas in the world that come from the school system central office are pretty much meaningless if they aren't followed with fidelity at the school level. And so some of the pain and frustration that I can see reflected in some of the people that have been very clearly hurt by what's happened at that school and in other places too, is the impact of folks not following through with fidelity the things that are right to do for kids and for the community. So it's very disappointing. Big picture, I think that there's a couple of things that we should be doing differently. One, we make it abundantly clear what our expectations are. Two, that we are following up to make sure that those expectations are being followed in terms of training. And I can't say with fidelity that has happened, because these are not new expectations. These are expectations that carry over from previous superintendents, and they just weren't followed. So that's my responsibility moving forward, is to make sure that the expectations are being met. And I think that that's a big difference and will make a big difference moving forward. I do not think that MCPS has the capacity to cure racism. I do not think that MCPS has the capacity to cure racism. I do think that we can make significant inroads in helping our children to develop better sense of self. And I think that we can respond in a more direct and more expeditious way than how has been responded in the past. And so I think that is the significant change that you can look forward to moving forward, is that we will be much more proactive about how we address these things and much more expeditious in our reaction when we address those things. Last piece, and I think that this is important too. We've set this system up this way. And this is what I was talking about when I said that not a whole lot has changed in the last 30 years. We've added a ton of programs and we've added a lot of resources to a lot of spaces, but there's still pretty significant gaps in terms of the program access in one corner of the county versus the program access in another part of the county. I went to Bethesda Chevy Chase High School, and you can't tell me that the quality of education at Walt Whitman or BCC is the same as the quality of education in other parts of the county. Well, we need to do something about that. And we need to make sure that there are really exciting and dynamic programs that really excite our kids and help them to develop passion so that they can become really great adults and contribute positively. But those programs need to exist at Paint Branch. They need to exist at Blake. They need to exist at Gaithersburg High School. They need to exist at Poolsville. They need to exist in Damascus. They need to exist in areas that may be a little bit of a stretch from the down county parts of service. So that was a lot, but this is a big topic, and it's one I'm very passionate about. And it's one where we need to make a lot of headway in a short period of time because our kids are feeling in a very strained way, and it's going to impact their learning in a negative way if we don't do something about it quick.
Dr. Taylor, before I call on Peggy Dennis, I wanted to ask a follow-up to that question. One of my concerns over the last several years has been the increased and visible anti-Semitism That's it's been a important issue over the course of the last year, and during your tenure of the last 6 months.
Yeah.
What have you seen as the issue there, and what can the school system do about dealing with that? Because it seems to be there's the graffiti, there's people writing on their desks, there's all sorts of really disturbing things happening in school in that space.
Well, same issue, different form. And sadly, none of this is new for Montgomery County. And I am disheartened to tell you that I don't know that we will ever cure the school system of hate, but we do need to call it out when we see it, and we do need to address it head on. And I think that that's been a pain point in the past. And I don't understand why. I've been in close communication with several Jewish community groups, not dissimilar to meeting with several groups in other aspects of our community to find out, what is the most effective way and best way to address this. Because candidly, I need help. It requires partnership to tackle these issues. There's sometimes, sadly, nuance that sometimes gets overlooked because it's nuanced. And I think we're in a place right now where we can't afford for that nuance to be overlooked, because at the end of this, there's a kid or a teacher or a staff member or a community member who's pained by us missing something. So I need as much help as I can get. This summer, I had tremendous help from members in various aspects of the Jewish community, because the Jewish community is not a monolith either. There are lots of different segments of the Jewish community who actually chipped in to help with messaging, to help with student support, to help with school support specifically to highly impacted schools when we had the graffiti this summer. I will say this, that we even tried to organize a sting with the Montgomery County Police Department to try to catch the assailant. We kind of thought we would get targeted the day before school started. No such luck, but we had, police cars in specific schools that were in the target pattern of graffiti, and I can't help but think that was a deterrent, but it is going to take all of us working together to have an impact in this space. But it is really the same issue cut from two ends of the same cloth.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Peggy Dennis, you're next, then Tanisha after that. Peggy?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Jeremiah, I'm so sorry you experienced what you did. I'm very much afraid that during our current political climate, expressions of racism have been normalized, and that's going to take us a long time and possibly a generation to recover from. Thomas, I had two questions. I have a third, but there are other people that are ahead of me for that. First question is, do we, through our PTAs, have a robust program of mentoring and tutoring, especially for the students who are English learners and who are doubly impacted both by difficulty with their studies and the language barrier?
No. And I'm not sure PTA is the right vehicle. But no, we don't. And I can tell you that one of the most effective strategies for advancing student learning is high dosage tutoring, and high dosage tutoring that's happening outside of the regular education setting, and that is reinforcing what's happening in the regular education setting. This is way harder than it sounds, and I'll tell you why. Oftentimes, when we have a tutoring situation or an outside tutor or something along that space, they either are going in a different direction than what's being reinforced in the classroom, or they're repetitive of things that are not reinforcing the deficit skill areas, because understandably, kids are struggling in their deficit skill areas. So it's way harder than it looks, but no, we don't. And I would say that we even struggle to provide the adequate resources for our English learners in the regular school setting. candidly, we just haven't kept pace with the rapid increase in student population in this space. So here's the interesting dynamic. The dynamic is that just a few years ago, we were at 160,000 students. Now we're at about 155,000 students. So we've declined in student enrollment. At the same time of declining in student enrollment, we have increased exponentially our English learners. So we actually are declining in non-English learners very rapidly and replacing all of those students, or a good portion of those students, with those with language assistance needs. This has been very complex and very expensive because we have not kept pace with providing the resources from an English learner classroom dynamic to make sure that they are adequately supported. It's a big gap. If I were to say that there were two student groups that if I could overnight just make a significant impact on their performance and improvement, if we figured out somehow to solve special education and solve our English learner needs, MCPS would be back on top as the best school system in America. They really are the area that needs really a significant investment in order to see some change. I saw something pop up in the chat about impediments to community volunteers. That's also something that desperately needs to change. There are some barriers that MCPS needs to remove in order to welcome people back into the schoolhouse, so that our schools can be community hubs for support. Nobody says no like MCPS. So these are some of our disposition things that we need to change as an organization to be a little bit more welcoming of our community partners and to have folks back in our schoolhouse to help. So I hope that answers your question, but it's definitely an area that needs support.
Okay, second question was, and this comes from something that I heard on the radio about a number of the high schools having problems with kids not staying in classes, but hanging out in the halls and the bathrooms when there should be in class. Can school resource officers be helpful in keeping the kids where they're supposed to be?
So that's actually less of a problem this year for us than it has been in the past. That's actually, I would not even put that in the top 10 or the top 50 of concerns that I have. That's good news. The other side to that would be school resource officers could not actually assist with that. School resource officers, because they're police officers, are there to enforce the laws of the United States, Maryland, and Montgomery County, not to enforce school rules. That's something that school security would do. So by design, a school police officer or school-based police officer actually has zero responsibility and actually cannot have a role in enforcing school rules, unless, of course, the child is in fact breaking a law from Maryland or Montgomery County. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Peggy.
It's much less of an issue, I'd say, this year than in previous years.
Thank you, Peggy. Tanisha Wooten.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just want to say I am a law enforcement officer and I've been one for over 20 years. And I can say, although law enforcement officers cannot enforce school policies, we still can support the school in making sure that you all make sure that the children, all of the students follow the laws, rules, and regulations that you all have in place. Not laws, but definitely policies. When it comes to all of the racist and prejudice and justice, when it comes to special education, that is definitely a disheartening situation, especially with the second English, language learning students. There are definitely certain amounts of money that go into each child that attends Montgomery County public schools. And I don't know if those resources are actually being used, because each child that's in special education is supposed to receive from just the state alone and the local county, $24,000 plus dollars. And then when it comes to the English for the second language learners, they're supposed to receive at least $17,000 plus dollars. And that's just according to the 2023 budget that's in place. And so I'm sure it's way more, including the federal funds. So I'm trying to figure out where the funding is going to.
Sure.
And so my questions are, does Montgomery County basically have a procurement that other jurisdictions piggyback off of? And also, whenever it comes to the bus cameras and electric buses and things like that, are other counties following these pursuits? And what exactly are you all coming up with in order to make it a standardized situation? Because it just doesn't seem like the math is mathing up. And it seems like something else is going on with the budget. And we're just trying to figure out where the money's going to so that our children can actually have a free and appropriate public education. It doesn't feel like the funds are going where they're needing to go. So I would appreciate a comment. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely a lot to hit on there. And I actually would agree with you in some of those regards. What I would say in general is that most of our students with disabilities require an awful lot more than $24,000 per student to educate, especially the ones that are in a classroom of 8 students because of their service needs. So it's really hard to get caught up in the averages or the average per pupil anything. And our average per pupil is actually around 19,000 per student. But what often gets overlooked is what the overhead costs are to do a whole host of things. And I would say it's painful for me to say this because there is a bit of a shoestring budget in the school system right now. 90% of our budget is 2 things: how many people we have and how much we pay them. It's 90%. If you want to know where the school system's budget goes, it goes to people. And 90% of it is how many staff members we have and how much we pay them. That accounts for 9 out of every $10 in the school system's budget. Where does the other 10% go? Well, it goes to overhead. And unfortunately, what I can tell you is that it is an alarmingly low percentage of overhead given the size of the operation. So that's everything from buses, gasoline, even the electricity that goes into our EV buses or the electricity that goes into the lights to operate the school. It's all of our materials and supplies, which is an alarmingly low ratio. A better ratio for a school system our size would be something like 18% overhead, not 10% overhead. That is dangerous. Now, there's 2 ways to look at that. You could look at that and say, well, gosh, MCPS is overstaffed. No, I don't think that they are. And you just need to spend a few minutes inside an elementary school to find out that they are not overstaffed. And they certainly aren't overstaffed in special education or English as a second language. Do we have more non-classroom facing positions at the secondary level? Yes. That's probably an area to look at, and that's probably an area to review. Do we have an awful lot of central office staff? Yes, and that's an area that I will actually be cutting in this upcoming budget because I do think that we are overstaffed centrally. Those are things that will definitely have an impact, but not to the impact of being able to increase or improve class size or something along those space, because those are things in the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to just have an impact over 200 campuses. It really is way more significant than cutting a few dozen positions in central office. So it really is a significant organization in terms of its size and scope. And it is something that I think some people overlook. And you see this really big number that shows up in the media, but I think people forget that it's divided by 150 some odd thousand students and 25,000 full-time employees and an additional 9,000 part-time employees to make the system run. We have over 1,000 bus drivers, which puts us on par with Metrobus. And we've got over 200 restaurants that we're running. They're called school cafeterias. We have the largest restaurant chain in Montgomery County. And those things are operational expenses, and it's pretty big. In terms of procurement, you asked some really good questions. Yes, we do piggyback contracts. That is actually something that is a positive part about government spending, is that you can leverage cooperative contracts through procurement. We do a mix of generating our own that other people piggyback on for the lowest rate, or we piggyback on somebody else's contract for the lowest rate. Very useful strategy. I am not seeing a lot of other school districts go the electronic bus route. I'm not sure what the impetus was for that decision several years ago. It's not one that I would have recommended, and I'll tell you why. All of the electronic buses require to be taken offline in the middle of the day because they can't hold a full charge for the entire day. The technology has not caught up with the distance and charge that is required for the bus distances that MCPS uses. So I'm not entirely sure what fed into that decision and why someone thought that was a good move. But it's maybe not the best financial decision that MCPS has made. It was maybe a good environmental decision, but and a good from a sustainability standpoint, but it was probably not the world's best business deal. And definitely fraught with some issues since then. Very much a pain point for me because I'm stuck dealing with it. But I'm not seeing a lot of other school districts go in the same direction because of how expensive it is to implement. Just by cost comparison, a diesel bus is about $100,000, $105,000 to buy a diesel bus. They last about 15 years or about 300,000 miles. And an EV bus lasts about 250,000 miles or about 10 years. And they cost about twice as much. And they don't work the whole day. So there are some really significant pain points with that maybe aren't the best financial investment. And yet, despite all of that, it's still less than 10% of our operating budget, which is really significant. Following the money in MCPS is really easy because it's the people that we have and how many of them we have and how much we pay them. Compensation is competitive, but not amazing in MCPS. It is way better than it is in many other spaces, which is great. It means that we can retain a large portion of our workforce every year, and it's very expensive to live in Montgomery County. So paying a premium for your staff is a priority for Montgomery County because of the cost of living expenses in the county and trying to sustain a workforce that can afford it, but they are by no means amazing wages or outside of the market in terms of what we pay. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Taylor. Janice.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I'm going to keep talking about the electric buses for a second here. Back in January, the school system had paid $168,000 for a assessment of the Department of Transportation from CESO, the Center for Effective School Operations. That report has never been presented to the Board of Education. It has never been discussed. And in there is very specific immediate action items and a change management plan, including open the solicitation process to multiple vendors for the electric bus procurement, whereas I've heard you speak about renegotiating with the same identical vendor, which is very concerning after reading this report. This report basically details that the Transportation Department is at a critical phase. If the contract continues the way it's going, it has the ability to crush the Department of Transportation because one EV bus, as you've said, does not equal one diesel bus. You need basically one and a half which
Yes.
is going to up the cost. So one of the change management proposals or suggestions in here or whatever directives that the school board paid for, convert the charging stations to MCPS ownership. It says that right here on page 10 of the one section on financial management. It says enable separate pricing for different vehicle types and ensure proper contract performance penalties are included. Now, what's interesting about this action item from CESO is it aligns with the Maryland Appellate Court that has ordered the Board of Education to review the award of the EV procurement. And we have not seen that happen either. So you can say it's, the overhead is only 10%, but this is a $168 million contract that's only for a third of the buses.
Yeah.
We do the math on this. This crushes the Department of Transportation. It's a financial albatross that cannot be recovered from. And this report says it is critically important that the brakes be put on and changes be made. And I was going to add one more thing. It also talks about the incredible danger that the people in the MCPS Department of Transportation maintenance department are in because they're putting electric buses, which are heavier than diesel, on the same lifts. Plus, the buses are too close together, putting them in danger of electrocution. So you can ignore all the money, crush the finances, but let's not kill anybody. Thank you.
Yeah, let's definitely not kill anybody. That would certainly help. No, good news. I think we've addressed and mitigated the safety issues, but you haven't said anything that is wrong to me. I just don't think it's sustainable. The current path. And there's definitely a lot that needs to be revisited in that space. And I think I actually haven't read that report, but the things that you chose to highlight are really good and make total sense to me, and definitely are in line with where I see us going as a district. Since I came on as superintendent, I've made several bus purchases, none of which have been EV buses. It's not because I hate the environment. It's because I'm trying to make good financial decisions given the limited resources that we have. Diesel buses are going to be a part of our future for the foreseeable future because we do have limited resources and the sustainability timeline and the horizon for them is much better. Extricating ourselves from a bad financial deal is going to be really interesting. They finally, the vendor that we're working with right now, which was a non-starter for me, finally remitted back payment for chargebacks that were owed to us. And it took me threatening a lawsuit to get that. Very dissatisfying on a number of fronts. So I appreciate you elevating that. And it's there's nothing like cleaning up someone else's mess. But onward and upward.
Thank you, Janice, and thank you, Dr. Taylor. Jerry Garson, you're next.
Can any new school construction or major renovation provide for individual thermostats in each classroom to reduce carbon emissions and to reduce the heating and air conditioning expenses for the county and for the Board of Education?
So if they actually increased or if they actually decreased costs, yes, but what they would do is actually increase costs. When you individualize temperature control for individual classrooms, what actually ends up happening is that you increase costs to HVAC. In terms of dealing with carbon monoxide, I actually think that there's a ton of environmental work that needs to be done to HVAC systems that's really troubling. One of the more significant things that's good to put on everybody's radar is how bad the HVAC infrastructure is in MCPS. One of the things that I've observed looking at our infrastructure is during the pandemic, they upgraded the filtration in all of our schools, but did not upgrade the systems to go with the filtration. So what you had is older systems that were pushing air through a tighter filter, and as a consequence of which they were aging our systems even worse. So there's actually a lot of investment that needs to go into that space, both short term and long term, because it is so bad. And I think you're talking about really two separate issues that need to be addressed. One is the environmental quality and making sure that we have individual monitors in classrooms, that we do. But individual temperature controls would actually have a negative impact on our costs, because anytime that there's variability from classroom to classroom, you're actually increasing cost to HVAC.
Dr. Taylor, I want to ask a follow-up question to Jerry's question. Several years ago, we had the then Comptroller of Maryland, Peter Francho, talk to us about the cost of constructing schools in Maryland vis-a-vis other states. I'm wondering, from your experience in Stafford, is it cheaper to build schools, construct schools in Virginia than it is in Maryland? And do you see a path forward where we might get new school facilities for less than we're spending at Montgomery?
Yes, to all of the above. So my experience has been a little bit better in Virginia, and the most school construction projects that I had going on at one time, I had 12 school constructions going on at the same time in Chesterfield, Virginia. At the time, Chesterfield was the fastest growing district in Virginia. It was about 70,000 students. I was the deputy superintendent, and I oversaw all the operations. And of those 12 construction projects, 10 of them were elementary schools that had the same design. They were template designs, prototype designs, and the cost savings was pretty substantial. For a 950 student school, we were actually producing at just under $41 million a piece. That same school in Montgomery County would be a lot more expensive. A couple of things that feed into that we need to be mindful of, and I'm hoping to bring some fiscal discipline to our construction department in this, is that we don't have to say yes to every request. That school construction and the architect space, they have designs that they are working with. We do not need to add enhancements and modifications to everything to make a learning environment great and to make the learning environment effective. I think that there's a number of things with our ongoing construction projects that I probably would not have given a green light to. But MCPS, historically, we've been a school system that defers to try to support projects in the hopes and dreams of a community versus what really needs to get done in the space and what needs to be supported in the space. So I hope that that's helpful.
No, it's very helpful. Jen asked a question in the chat: for the contracts in Virginia paying prevailing wage? So is it a question of being in a right to work state as opposed to?
No, we absolutely have prevailing wage contracts, and it's an option, and it's definitely not dissimilar to Maryland. It's an option in Maryland too. I think that there's a deference towards prevailing wage in Maryland, which is great, and it certainly impacts your state aid. There's less state aid in Virginia. As a matter of fact, there's almost none. So if a locality is going to build a school in Virginia, they're going to do it almost entirely with local dollars. So it's a little bit different in terms of managing that mix of prevailing versus non-prevailing wage. But that is an option, and definitely something that is part of any kind of bid process. So
thank you for that. Quentin, you are next.
Okay, am I on?
You are.
You are.
Amazing. I'm quite reminded. I'm with the president of the Cloverleaf Civic Association, and we had a group of people who mentored students, and I say mentored, not tutored. And I think you need to make a distinction between the two. I'm not going to replace the teacher, and we didn't try to do that as our group, but we found it increasingly difficult to be involved with the students. The first principal I worked with about 15 years ago, he encouraged us to participate, with the students, and I think that's an encouragement to me that I'm doing something good. And we were doing a lot of good things. I had students who one student was given to me in second grade, and he was the guidance counselor gave me an hour interview about how to handle him because he was such a problem. Well, I never had a problem with him, and I decided to mentor him all the way through high school, and he went from a poor student to an honor roll student. And I think that the difference is these students need encouragement, and just to sit there and listen to him read, ask him how his day is at school, how things are going, what he's learning, what he'd like to do. Encourage them to participate in after-school activities, which these students are not encouraged to do. There's a lot of things that they can participate in. At the time, they were doing things like computers and robotics and things like that, as long as we did this. I think, and the one thing, he knew that I cared about him, and he knew I wasn't getting paid to do anything. I really cared about him, and I think also well, I always tried to get to know the parents on a first name basis, so that and his teachers too. And when there were issues, I felt free to discuss them with the parent or the teacher, and sort of bring everybody together to help that student. And I think that's we can't be adults in the community. We can't be tutors necessarily. If he's got a question, I can answer it, fine. But if I didn't see that as my role, and I think there's a place for us. And I'll tell you, the last I think it's 4 years ago, we had our last year. We've been shut out of the school since then, and we were mentoring our COLA, which has a lot of issues for a lot of students. But there's good students there, but there are students that are left behind just because they're not seen as good students either. So I just add that my 2 cents and encourage you to use people in the community and to develop a program which doesn't concentrate us on being tutors necessarily, because you have teachers, and we can't replace them. Right. But we can encourage the student to learn from them, and that's my 2 cents.
Well, thank you. And I would say that every kid is one caring adult away from being a huge success. So thank you for doing that. And I couldn't agree with you more. That's definitely something we need to be better about doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Quentin. Amy, you are next, please.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna ask you if you would commit to lobbying to reinstate SROs, not the newfangled CEOs, but true SROs. I feel like they did quite a lot of important good in the schools, and there'll be a new county executive in 2 years who might be more receptive to getting them reinstated, but I think that a lot of the lobbying will have to come from the school system. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And the answer is maybe. I will say that right now I don't think that the data is compelling, because what I've seen is actual bit of a drop in student misbehavior and issues that are crime related. That being said, I've always worked in environments that had SROs and found great value in their work. Hiring the last police chief, I've benefited tremendously from his experience in the police department in terms of shoring up a lot of our safety in the school system. And he's been a tremendous value add in terms of sharing some inside baseball in terms of how the police department is operated, and it's really enhanced how we look at safety. So maybe is probably the best answer I could give you. And there's definitely a lot of dimensions to consider in that, not just who the county administrator is or the county executive.
Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Peggy Dennis, another question from you.
Yes, many, many years ago when my husband and I moved here, There was a robust adult education program tied to the high schools and the trades and skills shops that were in each high school. We took
Right.
automotive mechanics, we took an advanced woodworking class. My understanding is that other than our Edison High School of Technology, all of those facilities have been shut down. And I think it would be much to all of the students' advantage if those trades shops were reopened so that kids could have exposure to things other than just academics and more hands-on learning. Any thoughts?
Yeah, tons. And thank you for that question, Peggy. I think that this kind of speaks to what we hope to do in the school system, and not every kid is college is a great fit for, and we have to acknowledge that and create programs and pathways that prepare kids for great futures that don't have college in the game plan, and that's okay. In fact, as a matter of fact, it's better than okay. It just needs to be a part of the offerings that we have. And the good news is that every high school has a lot of different career and technical education outlets. What I am probably more interested in is how do we structure those into pathways that have certifications so that when a kid graduates from high school, they actually have a certification in a specific area that jumpstarts their future career life, whether they're going to college or not. I think there's tremendous growth opportunity in that space, and I also think that it's a way that we can improve some of the program access in different parts of the county, and really create some exciting programs that otherwise wouldn't be at the top of our list. And I'll give you a couple of examples. My wife is a civil engineer who designs airport runways, and she probably never would have gotten interested in that field had she not been interested in aviation and avionics. And we have a program at Magruder High School that is an aviation program that trains kids to be future pilots. Well, there's a big demand for future pilots in the industry right now. And kids could, in very short order after graduating high school, be making a six-figure salary in the aviation space, and maybe not even in the aviation space, but even in the aviation mechanic space. Well, there's just a whole host of local economic outcomes that can be tied to programming that we do. We just have to find the right fit. And I think that this is a great opportunity for us to do that, especially with us opening 2 new high schools in 2 years.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Dave, you're up.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. I wish you the best of luck. I don't have my kids in Montgomery County schools anymore because a quick question. What is the policy on phones in school, and do you agree with it?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question.
Could you
and Dave,
repeat the question? Because
I'll repeat it. It's he asked what's the policy on phones, and I'm assuming this is cell phones, right? Yeah. And do I agree with it? Well, I'm going to start by this and say, Dave, I think I'm going to need more than luck to be successful. So I'll take all the support that I can get, whether you have kids in the school system or not. Right now, there is a policy that restricts the use of cell phones in schools, but it restricts the use of cell phones in schools. We have a dozen schools right now that are piloting an away all day kind of approach where the phone is severely restricted, where there's no access to cell phones throughout the school building. And wouldn't you know it, those schools are doing great. And overall, those schools are having a great experience. Right before I left Stafford County as superintendent, we had a severely restrictive phone policy, and the positive outcomes were pretty dramatic. The more that we can limit distractions, I think the better off we are. I fully expect our approach to be a little bit more comprehensive. The benefit that we have right now with the schools doing a pilot is that we're learning a lot from different approach. No one school is doing it the same way. And we are picking up different strategies that are effective, and we'll adapt a singular approach as we move forward. But it seems as though both qualitatively and quantitatively, the data speaks for itself, that when the phones are away, the kids are having a better experience in the school. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Dave, for that question, and Dr. Taylor for the answer. I want to interject another question here. Dr. Taylor, since you've got this long experience in Montgomery County, what can you say about the achievement gap, the difference between schools in the east part of the county and the west part of the county? It comes up all the time, and I don't know that we really focus on it, but it is really concerning for those of us who live in the east part of the county, and we don't see the same kind of facilities and access to resources that people have on the other side of 270, for example.
Yeah, no kidding. A couple of things, and it's something that Jeremiah mentioned that I think we all need to view as just a complete and utter embarrassment. We have the expectation that you're able to read and write by third grade. What a joke. Our kids should be able to read and write much sooner than third grade. And I think we have artificially set the bar very low, and yet we're still not able to meet that bar. And it should be troubling to all of us. This is exacerbated when the learning environment at some schools is so clearly and dramatically different than the learning environment at another school. And I'll use a couple of examples. Westland Middle School in Bethesda is not a new school. It's not. But it is a very nice school, and it's been very well maintained. And then you take a look at Eastern Middle School and Silver Spring or Benjamin Banneker, and the difference is dramatic in terms of how we've taken care of those facilities, what we've invested in those facilities, and not just the physical structures, but also the programs that we've offered. They're not exciting to kids. And as a consequence of that, that disengagement is showing up in our performance. I think that when we invest in exciting opportunities for young people and environments that are safe and that are positive, that our likelihood of better performance increase, that's on the long-term horizon. I think the programmatic stuff is a lot easier than the physical structures, just because of the time that it takes. If we were all the decision makers in Montgomery County, and we had all the influence in the entire county, and we were to decide to build a school today, it would still take 3 years for that building to show up and to be opened. So, in 2.5 years, if we were really, really pressing it. So a lot of the building and capital improvement things that we do are on a really long time horizon. And every year that we miss a step and we don't get a project completed on time, it really has this compounding effect. And I would estimate that we're somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 to 15 years behind in school construction. And maybe it's worse than that, but just based on what I've seen, visiting about half of our campuses, that we're about 10 to 15 years behind. And that has largely been from kicking the can down the road year after year after year. And you couple that being behind in maintaining our buildings and renovations and school construction with, we haven't really done anything in the programmatic space that is keeping our kids engaged in the eastern part of the county, or even in other parts of the county. It doesn't have to be the eastern part of the county. It could be Gaithersburg or Germantown or whatever. And those things have shown, and the results speak for themselves. I think that you add an exponent onto this when you see that our students with disabilities, are those that access special education, are disproportionately Black and brown. And our students who are accessing the English language for the first time have a really significant gap that they have to cross before they turn 18 and they start to age out of our school system. So there are some time constraints, there are some physical constraints, and there are some barriers that we need to address. So I think that we do that through programmatic engagement and investment in our learning environments.
Well, we'd love to have you back to talk more about that. Maybe one more question from Joe McDermott, and then we'll let you get on with your evening. And
Cheers.
I'll talk after Joan, turn it back to Joyce. Joan?
Hi, thank you very much for speaking. I taught at Walter Johnson High School for 17 years.
Oh, I thought we were going to be friends.
It was, I was really proud of it to start with. And I have to say, part of my retirement was what was going on with MCPS. So I'm very happy with some of the things you said tonight. I hope you, in your consideration of grading policies, get rid of we lost final exams and we lost grading by trend when you don't have a final exam. So I thought those are two of the many flaws. But then another thing it just hit me to ask. I was enjoying listening to all the other questions. It really bothered me that MCPS seemed to always try to reinvent the wheel. They were creating curricula. Yeah, and as a science teacher, it was really painful when the science, the group at central office would try to design new curricula, and it was really, really poor, just thrown together, probably violated a whole lot of copyright law, and we were told that we could no longer order books.
Oh my God!
So there's this tremendous investment in all this electronic stuff. And but the value that the publishers put into books couldn't be replicated by a school system like ours. So I was curious if you thought you might return to the Stone Age and get textbooks again.
Yeah, well, we definitely have textbooks, and I wouldn't call them the Stone Age. Actually, what we've learned about our kids is that they benefit greatly from the tactile experience of turning a page, weirdly. So I don't think that they have gone out of fashion yet. And so one of the things that troubles me about so what science did you teach, just out of curiosity?
I have a PhD in molecular biology.
Okay.
So I taught mostly biology, all the different flavors of it, up to AP biology, and in fact, molecular biology, which is sort of beyond high school students realistically, but it was a great lab class.
Yeah.
And then I did teach some chemistry the last 2 years when the curriculum changed and everybody needed to take chemistry at a certain stage. And so I helped pass that bolus through.
Well, you lost me at chemistry, but what I will say is that to your point, photosynthesis did not change throughout your teaching career, and the need to recreate curriculum around photosynthesis and the function of mitochondria in cells did not change. And I actually feel like the requirement or the soft requirement for curriculum refresh often probably threw out a lot of great content and a lot of great resources in favor of new for the sake of new. And I definitely don't think that we're in a financial position where we can afford to do that anymore. So hopefully that'll give us some discipline that we don't have to reinvent everything all the time. There are two subject areas in MCPS that purchase curriculum and then the rest that write. And I think you have to be one or the other. I don't think that you can continue this mixed modal approach, and I think that can be very expensive. But right now, our math and literacy is purchased curriculum, and all of our other subject areas are in-house created. I can't speak to which is better, but I feel a need to go in one direction or the other. So that's what I got.
Okay, thank you. There's a lot to be said for books that have been worked on for a long time. Thank you
Sure.
very much. Okay.
And then I'll jump in before I turn it back to Joyce. Dr. Taylor, why has cursive writing been thrown under the bus?
I don't think that it has. We still do it in third grade.
Okay, we heard that there was really no emphasis on cursive writing, and that seemed very problematic for those of us who grew up, working on that, even though mine is not very good.
Yeah,
So,
mine's pretty terrible too, but third grade it is.
thank you very much. Joyce, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, I wanted to thank you, Dr. Taylor, and I appreciate very much of what you said. I mean, the cursive writing is interesting. None of my grandkids can actually sign a piece of paper with their name that anybody could ever read, which made me wonder what's going on here. But we really appreciate your taking the time and the commitment that I hear coming through to really pull MCPS back up again, because it has slipped. I have kids who graduated from BCC actually in the 80s, mid 80s, and it's doing okay, but it's got work. And I'm also glad to hear you focus on how much Montgomery County, to my horror when I learned about it, has ignored the eastern part of the county in so many of our schools.
Yeah, significant.
I heard Montgomery County is, the wonderful school system, and I blindly assumed that meant across the county and that commitments were made across the county. And, it was pretty disheartening to discover that they aren't. And I will encourage you in that. And thank you very much for explaining and giving us your thoughts and the places that you see we have room for improvement. Very much appreciated.
Well, I appreciate you for having me, and I hope to make a return visit and to continue our conversation and to follow up. And please hold me accountable for what we do moving forward and the things that need to take place. And I hope to be good partners to you in this work.
Well,
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Bye-bye. Joyce?
Okay, so now we're at new business, and if anybody has any new business, speak up, please. Or comments on Dr. Taylor's discussions.
I found him really refreshing. I thought while he was speaking is that we've heard similar things from other superintendents over the last 10, 15, 20 years. So I wish him well, and I'm really hopeful that he can bring some of Virginia's ideas about school construction to Montgomery County, because I do think we spend a lot on schools, and he was suggesting that they can build a school in Virginia at a fraction of the price that we spent here.
Well, I actually also liked his focus on the fiscal responsibility part. Just because something sounds good, we do have to figure out how we're paying for them. And sometimes I think that our county and our government doesn't necessarily figure that out and choose priorities. And I think that I think we have a significant risk of running into more difficult economic times. So it's important to have someone who will, approach that in some systemic way and try to do what's best with what available funds we may have.
Agreed 100%. And I think he was pretty candid about the electric bus situation with MCPS. And thank you, Janice, for your information on that. As we know, you've done some yeoman's work in sort of bringing that to the surface. And it sounds like the new superintendent fully understands that project and what the implications are.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just disturbing that he hasn't read the report that the Board of Education paid for. And I encourage everyone here to read that report. I put a link in the chat. It describes the end of the Department of Transportation. It's a crushing report, scathing. It's really, really bad about what's going on with the Department of Transportation. And if they don't make a sea change, there could be no buses tomorrow to pick your kid up. So
Thank you, Janice.
I was thinking a number of things in the previous administrations that he criticized really showed some utopian thinking in previous administrations. The bus situation in his data on that being a prime example, but there just seemed to be a lot of unrealistic policies. I had kind of forgotten about no final exams.
I had
amazing. I was talking to somebody about, I guess this is a state thing, but you don't have to know how to parallel park now either as a 16 or 17-year-old kid.
Yeah, well that's true too. But the final exam thing I think came out of, I don't know if you remember, there used to be statewide exams called the high school assessments. And I think MCPS was frankly embarrassed that at the failure rate, and this is one of those social equity things that would embarrass them. They found that students who took algebra in middle school would pass the test, and those who didn't take the class until high school generally failed. They literally, many of the students would put their name on the paper and then just put their heads down and sleep through the exam. Because there was no consequences. We at work at WJ, we used to stand on our heads to get the few kids who would fail the high school assessments to pass. So there was ridiculous bridge projects, et cetera, that they used to use. And so the HSAs slowly went away, one at a time, and then the final exams, when they took away the county final exams, again, I think it was partly an embarrassment thing. And because too many kids would fail those. And the obvious solution to that would be say, oh, you failed this class, which is required. You need to take the class again. And I figured that would improve their participation in studying. But that's not what they did. They took away the exams, and then they told people who had electives like myself with molecular biology that we couldn't give final exams either. And they took that aspect of the grading out. And so you were left with 2 quarter grades. And originally, if you got a B followed by an A, you'd get an A. And if you had an A followed by a B, you get a B. That was considered unfair. A student member of the board complained for one thing, and it was like they complained it was unfair. So A to B, A, B became A, BA was A, everybody got A's, and all the colleges understood that, in fact, our grade inflation got a lot worse. So I'm waiting for that to come back. But I was very, very encouraged by him. He did sound very, very sensible, very practical, open, as he said. I really do hope that. I think you're right. There was a lot of pie in the sky thinking, and he seems to have a grasp on what actually might work in the classroom.
I would mention this, that my recent conversations with newly elected Board of Education members and the incumbents and a lot of the senior MCPS staff, that they really like this guy, that he's really seemed to be very refreshing compared to some of the previous incumbents. So let's wish him well, because it's more than a half of the county's budget, and it's not getting any smaller because of state policies. So back to you, Joyce.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else to add? Again, our next meeting is going to be with our county executive, so I encourage everybody to mark it on your calendar and come with your questions.
One thing that I noticed that I think is good is the willingness to look at the middle level administrators. I have friends who are teachers, and they complain bitterly about this. They also complain about the lack of support for them, that they feel that no matter how successful they are or how much they love the kids or their job, that they could walk in any day and be fired because there is such a capricious lack of support for the teachers on the part of the administrators. And I do not doubt that. One of my most extraordinary experiences living here. Years ago, I was the president of Montgomery County now, and there was a great deal of sexual harassment going on at one of the schools. And there were teachers at our meeting, and they were telling us about this. The boys would sit outside the cafeteria and harass girls as they went in, and this went on, and everybody knew about it. And several days later, the principal called me and asked me to please make this concern go away because he didn't want the name of his school badgered about that way, even though he did not deny that the problem was taking place. And I ruined his day by saying, well, you know, I used to teach high school, and I found that the most important variable in any of these issues is the attitude of the principal. And I was fortunate because ours was wise, sane, and even-handed. I said, so I hope this is a wonderful opportunity for you to express your concerns on this issue and act on them. But he was terrified of doing his job because of the climate, whatever it was. I think he was afraid of the parents. He was afraid of XYZ, but there's no common sense attitude on the part of the administration. Kids are kids. They will do what they will do. And they're, as my brother-in-law used to say, children are persons in training. And one of the jobs of adults is to help them in the right direction. And it doesn't happen that way.
Anybody else have something to add? Well, thank you, everyone. And I will see you. Well, actually, we have another meeting. We have Jerry's discussion also of the home assessment appraisal process coming up next week for those interested. And then we will see you in January. And I wish everybody, if I don't see you on the 16th, even if I do, a wonderful holiday season.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Thank you, Joyce. Happy holidays, everybody.
Alan, did you get that?
Wait.